case you didn't know, my name is Marty Bacher, and it's always my privilege to welcome you here and invite you into this community. We're here to nurture a deep and abiding sense of the divine through the practice and experience of unity principles. And so we're just grateful that you could be here. We like to say that we're here to love and to grow and to serve. And so we're just delighted that we could be here together. We do hold a belief that our spiritual life is enhanced by being in spiritual community together. And so that you can learn a lot of stuff, but you can't get hugs elsewhere. So we're grateful that you're here with us. If you're here for the first time, we just want to extend a special welcome. We want to invite you to relax. There's no big close at the end. So just enjoy yourself. We hope something that happens today lifts your heart and your mind to a greater awareness of who you are. If you are in need of spiritual support, we want to make you aware we have a ministry of prayer. It'll be our privilege to pray with you and for you. You can either fill out a prayer request in the lobby. There's a form. There's prayer request forms, or you can also go online as well. That recognition of the one life, ever present and always available. And we recognize and know this one life, this one power, this one presence, whether we call it God or the 10,000 other names, is the essence of life. It is the creative intelligence which causes all things to be. And because we start with a principle of unity, of oneness, we know that all things exist within the one. Therefore, you and I are extensions of the one life, revealing itself into being. As we come here today, we are remembering the truth of our being. That it is this one life that animates us, that breathes its breath through us, that thinks its thought through us, that expresses through us. And so we open our hearts to the presence of unconditional love. We open our minds to divine wisdom. We open the very essence of our soul to remember who we are. And as this day unfolds, we allow something magnificent to take place as we return to that knowing of our human divinity and of our divine humanness. We are healed and transformed. Light seeks its expression. Love makes itself known. And so we give ourselves permission to be in alignment with our oneness, with our joy, with our beauty. As always, I give thanks for the many hands and hearts that come together every Sunday, and indeed every day of the week to provide this spiritual community, this beloved church. And I know that as we move forward today, that which needs to be said is said, that which needs to be heard is heard. Through the song, through the affirmation, through the message spoken. And so I'm giving thanks in advance for all of the blessings. It is with joy and gratitude that I do give thanks, as together we say, and so it is. Amen.
Together, bring peace to the world.
this our February affirmation for the last time. Together. Divine love dissolves fear and sets me free. I am filled with His powerful presence. I fully and freely forgive myself and others. I choose love above all other options. Divine love dissolves fear and sets me free. Thank you. So our inspirational readings will come at the end of our service today to welcome to the stage for the first time our wonderful Michelle Wilson.
So last week, Marty said in his message to us, pain is a gift to us. And John Stringer, who was here earlier this year, talks about our higher self. And this song is what I think of as a message from my lower self to my higher self. So maybe you can identify. I set out on a narrow way many years ago, hoping I would find true love along the broken road. But I got lost a time or two. I wiped my brow and kept pushing through. I couldn't see how every sign pointed straight to you. Every long lost street led me to where you are. Others who broke my heart, they were just northern stars, pointing me on my way into your loving arms. This much I know is true, that God bless the broken road, led me straight to you. Think about the years I spent just passing through. I'd like to take the time I lost and give it back to you. You just smile and take my hand. You've been there, you understand. It's all part of a grander plan that is coming true. And every long lost dream led me to where you are. Others who broke my heart, they were just northern stars, pointing me on my way into your loving arms. This much I know it's true, that God bless the broken road, led me straight to you, oh, straight to you. I know it's true, that God bless the broken road, led me straight to you. Yes, God bless the broken road and led me straight to you.
The great joy of ministry is, I'm a mess, is watching people step into the teaching. And by that I mean the teaching teaches us that we're not somehow broken for trying to find God, but that we are God-like beings who got broken and forgot. And so the journey home for many of us is through whatever it is, but it is to the realization of our inherent divinity. There's a fundamental shift that takes place, at least it did for me, when I began to perceive God or the divine as not something outside of myself that I was trying to coerce. I mean, let's just be honest. I had an agenda, that I was trying to coerce God into giving me what I wanted and doing what I wanted and making things happen the way I wanted, to the realization that there's a divine, infinite presence, and that presence is always available, and that presence and that power delights in its self-expression. It delights in its creation. And so as a beloved creation of the divine, I never have to overcome anything. I simply have to allow that which is in me to be expressed more fully. And so that song is so beautiful. Rascal Flatts, is that right? Yeah, I got a little hick in me. You can, yeah. Right? But it's such a beautiful song of that remembrance of the journey. Because many of us find the divine through those broken places. Many of us find we're living happy, comfortable lives. And we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, what we were taught to do. And then sometimes through either the divine discontent or through some catastrophe, some crises, we go in search of something deeper. And so I was struck by a passage this week that reminded me of something very powerful. You say, I think recently, it could have even been last week, I don't know. People always say after I'm done, oh, that was so good, whatever you said. And I'm like, what was it? Because glad that was good. But about this idea that so often we want to avoid the pain. And so we find all these ways to hide or to cover it up or to not make ourselves available to life, thinking that we'll avoid pain. And of course, we do, but we also avoid life. And we also avoid the joy and the fulfillment and all the goodness that is available to us by not dealing with the pain. And so I came across this idea, and it's really struck me. And Veronica Tagluva, you all know her, wrote this most profound thing. The most profound personal growth does not take place while reading a book or meditating on a mat. She says it happens in the throes of conflict, when you are angry or afraid or frustrated. It happens when you are doing the same old thing and suddenly realize you have a choice. Right? You're doing the same old thing. And the interesting thing about the same old thing, sometimes the same old thing worked up to a point. You see, when I developed certain approaches to life, I did it as a 10 and 12-year-old child, dealing with the madness that was surrounding me, figuring out my strategy for living. Right? And part of my strategy was, I know I'll be the peacemaker, which is kind of a lofty idea, but the only tools I had available to me were not all that skilled. So it was, how do we get everybody to get along? How do we get everybody to get along? Let's all just be happy. Let's all just be nice. Let's all just be compliant. Right? And so that was a wonderful thing. I think I brought some peace and comfort to my family in a difficult time. But then I chose a path of ministry because I love people and I love serving people and I love these ideas and I love sharing these ideas. And although I didn't ever really start out to go into ministry, it seemed to be one of those inevitabilities. And so I brought the skill set that I had. And I found that in ministry, I didn't know it at the time, but I was trying to do some things that may have worked as a 10-year-old in my family, but didn't work so well with adults in a spiritual community. And so all of my people-pleasing, all of my codependency, all of my unskilled behavior was not serving me or the community. You see, this happens. We have this conversation a lot as we're moving into sort of a different model for ministry. It kind of stirs up some stuff. And so in church, I always often joke that the most political place you'll ever go to in the world is usually in churches. Right? Because everybody's, bless your little heart, right? As they're bringing their agenda and they're doing all the things and they're deciding who, but all in a very loving way. We're going to judge each other, but in a very loving way, of course. And so that gave me the great gift of being exited from my church, my first church. Now, I didn't really see it as a gift at the time. I kind of thought of it as being fired. It's kind of a surprising thing when you're all prayed up. You go into the board meeting and they say, we'd like you to leave. And yet, the greatest gift in the end was that experience. Now, it was the most painful gift, I will tell you as well. I'd make light of it, but it was horrifying. It's not fun. Crucifixion is never fun. I just want you to know. And yet, what that did for me, because what I realized in the experience, because what I believe, and I'm going to share this with you, you might want to take it, that when things happen in your life, that we use them for tools for our growth and our transformation. Now, that may not be right. It may not be fair. It may not be just, but it's there. And if it's there, I always say, I've noticed in my life, and I'm only 61, so I don't have a lot of experience to draw on, but I do have enough experience to realize that everything that's happened in my life, the common denominator was I was there. Have you noticed that? Like everything, every single thing, I was there. So everything that is happening in my life must have something to do with me. Yeah. Now, I was treated poorly, and I could... If I had a violin handy, I would tell you the sad story so that we could all weep and moan and gnash our teeth. But the essence of it is really, it became the greatest gift because in this process, in forming a new church, those that were resonant with my teaching and what we were doing immediately said, well, let's do something. We're here because we like you as our teacher, so let's do something. And so we prayed and we visioned and I said it's important for me that before we take any step forward, we do it from a healed place. You know how that is? You ever tried to create something out of an unhealed place? Yeah. And you get an unhealed result. Because this is how much the universe loves us. It says, I want you to grow. I want you to evolve. I want you to become. And so when you leave that relationship because it's so terrible, and you go find a new relationship not having done the inner work, the universe has a way of supporting you saying, you're not done. Your inner work is not done, and let me prove it to you. And if you don't think this one is it, I got 5 more in the works just waiting, So you might want to say, well, what is it about me that needs to be healed? And so in my process, I really got to look at that part of me, that sweet little tender 10 or 12-year-old child that made some decisions and said, well, that passage of when I was a child, I behaved like a child. But now that I'm an adult, I'm called upon for adult-like ways. And so I still consider myself a peacemaker. But I'm very resonant with this statement that says it is in the conflict that we find the truth. It is in the willingness to say what's really happening and not metaphysically, spiritually minded, affirmative BS. Or, right? But to say, from a very real and authentic place, first of all, you have to start with an idea. We're all divine. Everyone is divine. In my class, I'm taking I'm becoming unified in unity, or I don't know what they call it. And we're just talking about this wonderful passage about how Jesus was saying to us about how to pray for your enemies, how to bless those who persecute you. And you see, for me, that's the heart of the teaching. It's the most difficult part of the teaching. Most of the teachings of Jesus you can find in other places. But it's that radical statement that says, turn the other cheek. Now, as a child, when I heard that, it had a very different meaning. It had a meaning of people-pleasing. Don't make a fuss. Just let people have their way. But as an adult, I realized that that's a whole different concept. That when we are non-resistant, when we are flowing with the energy, then we are not attached to overcoming, but allowing something. And we can move beyond it. So if we start with the idea that we are all divine in origin, we are all spiritual beings. We are all from the same source. And to some degree or another, we all realize it. Some not very much. I say we're all divine, but some people's divinity is well hid. You gotta look. You really gotta look, right? Because around that radiance, around that wholeness, there's all the silly stuff that we've developed over time that houses that masks that. So when we start with the idea that we are all divine in origin, that we're all spiritually perfect, and humanly we're working through a process, then we don't hate each other for our differences. We don't persecute each other for our differences. We don't condemn each other for our differences. We say, how can I help you discover your divinity? More importantly, how can I discover my divinity so I'm not triggered by your process? It's a wonderful thing to realize that in life we're always perceiving reality according to our own sense of life. And so we see not what we want, but we see who we are. And so when we're starting to look at this differently, then conflict then begins to take on something different. It becomes then the opportunity, when properly managed, we have some models for conflict. Some of them involve bombs and weapons and all kinds of ugly stuff. Because the idea is, I will overcome you. If you are my enemy, I will destroy you, and yay, I win. Right? That is a concept that no longer serves us. So in conflict, when we can say, you are divine and I am divine, now let's look at how we are interacting, then we can have a conversation about the interaction as opposed to who's right and who's wrong. So this idea that at the heart of conflict, or where our real spiritual growth comes from that place of not. Now, we want to meditate, we want to read books, we want to ground ourselves in awareness, but often the true growth comes in those things that do cause anger and frustration and upset and mindlessness. Talking to a dear friend of mine, she said, it's interesting how we can project all of this stuff, that somebody on the freeway cutting me off is a horrible person. And yet if I cut somebody, if it's just because I'm in a hurry, and surely they would recognize my divinity, right? You want to think it like it's about them. But when we can move into that place and that awareness of us as divine beings working together for a greater good, and then we can see that we each bring a unique and beautiful perspective to what we're creating. And so sometimes our friend of mine said that, when we come together in spiritual community and when we're committed to it, we're going to grow up all over each other. Right? Sometimes it's less than all perfect. Sometimes it's really annoying. Right? And so we start the idea that you are divine and I am divine, and so I will hold you in that truth. And so let's talk about what happened. And let me share with you how I felt about what happened. And let me hear what's happening for you. See, that's a tremendous level of respect. What I found over time is that I had a real calling. So it's interesting. I had a real calling towards conflict resolution. I like to stand in the midst of community or people or couples or whatever who are not able to get to the truth. And when you can stay with it, when you practice those skills, and when you can start to speak in a different way and hear in a different way, what often emerges is the thing that I am missing. Let me be a little more concrete. You get to the place, I don't feel respected, says person A. Person B, I don't feel respected. Wonder why you're together. Isn't that odd that the universe would bring two people that don't feel respected together? Right? It's very often the same thing, but we don't get there because we want to make it about you. So when we can stand in the midst of this and realize we are divine beings, that we are whole and perfect and complete beings, and we're also human, and we've also developed a set of skills, or unskills, as the case may be, then we're up-leveling our skills. Ken Kais talks about in his wonderful book that has a title, and it'll come flying back by here in a minute, about up-leveling our addictions to preferences. Right? And in that he's saying, when I have an addiction, I need you to be different. And my well-being is going to be dependent upon you being different. But when I'm up-leveling to the level of preferences, then I prefer that people be in my life that are a certain way. They don't have to be. Now I have a preference, and I shop according to my preferences. Right? See, in addictive behavior, in dysfunctional relationship, we stay attached and in relationships that don't work because we're convinced we can fix them. Convinced, right? Sometimes we go, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll do my work and see what happens. In the Tao Te Ching, which is the master class in life, so simple, it's very easy to miss the brilliance of it. I come back to it time and again, and that's where this title comes from. The middle way in Taoism, you all know the symbol of the Tao, of the yin and the yang, the black and the white, the complementary, the masculine and the feminine. And what it says to us is there's not duality in life, but polarity. In other words, I am told that electricity works because there's negative and positive ions, checking my technical advisor, that make electricity work. There's masculine and feminine energies that makes life work. There's dark, there's light, there's a balance. And what happens for us often is when we are not in the Tao, we are in the extreme. Or we go to the other extreme. But the Taoism teaches us there's a middle way. Wonderful passage from Tao number 37. And it says to us, the Tao never does anything, yet through it all things are done. If powerful men and women could center themselves in it, the whole world would be transformed by itself, in its natural rhythms. People would be content with their simple everyday lives, in harmony and free of desire. And when there's no desire, all things are at peace. A wonderful teacher in the 7th century said, when the mind is at peace, the world too is at peace. Nothing real, nothing absent, nothing holding on to reality. Not getting stuck in the void. You are neither holy nor wise, just an ordinary fellow who has completed his work. Eastern teachings, for me, help me center into that awareness. You see, I often feel like in relationship, when we're chosen to be in relationship, what we're trying to do is find the Tao of the relationship. And I bring in energy and you bring in energy, and if we fight about who's going to be right or wrong, will it be yin or will it be yang? I demand yang. Or perhaps we compromise and on Tuesdays we'll have yin and on Thursdays we'll have yang, right? But we realize it's not about the yin or the yang, it's about the way that things come into being. And so when couples, peoples, families, communities move into that middle way, where we're allowing the Tao, the energy, the divine to be revealed through us, we recognize that we need both light and dark. We need both masculine and feminine. We need the polarity, but we can't afford to move to duality. Does that make sense? So when we enter into this state, so I started by saying I love conflict. So what's it going to be, Marty? Is it going to be conflict or is it going to be peace? And I would say yes to that profound question. I would say yes. You see, we often think, as I started, we often think that if I avoid the discomfort, I will be at peace. But I don't know, have you ever had this situation? I don't want to pick out anybody individual, I'll just throw it out there to the room. You ever been in that situation where you have had a conversation and you don't feel complete with it, but you call it good? And you go home, and while you're cooking, you're thinking about that person, and while you're preparing the house and as you're doing all of the things you're doing, you're not present with what you're doing. Your energy is on that person. So that's why I say when we can invite the conflict in peaceful ways, then we can come to resolution so that our energy is on the task at hand. And what I find time and time again, it's a wonderful book if you're ever interested in this, kind of the basis of a lot of the work that I do is from a book called The Magic of Conflict by Thomas Crumb. And he talks about this idea that if you look at everything of beauty, it's created by conflict. Go to the Grand Canyon, where you will see the most majestic interaction of earth and water. One might call that conflict. No, it's going to be earth. No, it's going to be water. Oh, or we could just create a Grand Canyon. There you go, right? See, life doesn't fight with itself that way. All the ways that we see that. And what I see is when we can bring our whole selves to who we are, to what we're creating, willing to release our need to be right and willing to find that way, then what happens is something more magnificent, more majestic, more powerful than what we would find on our own. Layman Pang again says to us, he says, my daily affairs are quite ordinary, but I'm in total harmony with them. I don't hold on to anything. I don't reject anything. Nowhere an obstacle or conflict. Who cares about wealth and honor? Even the purest thing shines. My miraculous power and spiritual activity, you're asking? drawing water, carrying wood. We've all heard that phrase that before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. You go, well, what's the point of enlightenment? Because when you become enlightened, your attention is on chopping the wood and not chopping somebody's head off, and carrying the water and not drowning someone, right? You're present with life. So the invitation, I share this because as we are moving more deeply into this idea of a mission-centric ministry, it's different. The old model, the pastoral model, kind of has the minister at the top playing God, or at least daddy. And people come to daddy and say, well, we want to do it this way. I want to do it this way. And what do you think? Like, you're adults, figure it out. Here's our mission. What brings us closer to our mission? Go work that out. It also gets us out of the idea, I had to do this firsthand in my first ministry, where I got to really experience what happens, because what we love to do is we love to put people up on a pedestal. You notice that? Ooh, Marty, you're dreamy. You're perfect in every way. You're just the bee's knees. You're just, right? And they're like, well, this is getting boring. So let somebody knock down that pedestal. Let's crucify. Then we get, right? So I'm very mindful, having gone through it. It's like, please, let's just be real. Let's just be human. Let us just be in a spiritual experience together as we each bring forth our gifts, as we each bring forth our part of what is creation. And we do that in love, and we do that in peace, and we also recognize, because we are humans, there may be moments of conflict. And so rather than say, oh, we shouldn't have that, we say, well, let us welcome that to be expressed so that we can find our greater good. I always like to remember that the Reese's cup comes from the conflict of peanut butter and chocolate. And it's a beautiful thing, right? It's a beautiful thing, right? All creation, all invention comes from two seeming separate ideas coming together in a new way. And something powerful can happen. Now you're going to remember nothing else except the Reese's cup. I know it. I know how you are, right? So, in closing, we are, been talking about this all week, we are the center of consciousness. There is a part of me, there's a part of you that is seated in the divine. Now, there's a part of you that's crazy, just outright freaking crazy, right? You know that voice. What's going on? Judging, attaching, pushing, But then there's also that part of us that observes. And the more we ground ourselves in the observer self, in the divine self, then we can just kind of witness our craziness and go, hey, look at me being all crazy again, right? And I'll breathe and I'll move into my wholeness. So when we come back to our wholeness, we realize that we are the center of our consciousness. I am, you are, behind everything, just watching. That is our true home. That is our residence. Take away everything else and you're still there, aware that everything is gone. But take the center of awareness away and there's nothing. The center is the seat of the self. From that seat you are aware that there are thoughts, emotions, and a world coming in through your senses. But now you're aware that you're aware. That is the place we pray from. That is the seat of the Buddha self, the Hindu Atman, the Judeo-Christian soul. The great mystery begins once you take seat in the place within. Let us move to that place together now. Let us just remember that through all of our feelings and all of our emotions and all of our thoughts and all of our activities, there is a part of us that is aware. the seat of our soul, the observer who remembers our oneness with the divine. And as we are knowing our spiritual truth, we recognize this human experience as a joyful opportunity to grow, to suffer, to grow, to love, to grow, to panic, to grow, and to remember who we are. So this day, as we move into that place where we open ourselves to divine love, to infinite wisdom, we call forth that. We realize there is that middle way, the Tao of our being that brings into balance all things. And from that place of creation, we create loving relationships, joyful experiences. We experience abundance because we recognize the flow of life. And we remember that we are blessed. And so what a joy it is to know this truth. What a joy it is to bear witness to our inherent wholeness, our inherent goodness, our inherent beauty, our inherent peace. It is that term when we speak of the Christ within, is the realization of that divinity. And so from that place of wholeness, we speak this word into being, knowing that the divine delights in its self-expression. And we bless all things. We bless this spiritual community. We bless the world. We bless our brothers and sisters. We see no separation. We see our wholeness. We accept peace on earth, goodwill for all, a planet at peace and a world that works for all. And we bless all priests and all rabbis and all ministers and teachers of all faiths, for we recognize and know there are many pathways to the divine. And they are good. So in joy and gratitude, then, I'm simply giving thanks. As I release this word, I know that it is already established and that it is unfolding perfectly in divine right order and in perfect timing. For this and so much more, I simply give thanks, allowing it to be so, as together we say, and so it is. Amen.
God is my source, God is my power, God gives me everything I need. So I give thanks for all my blessings, God gives me everything I need. Love is my source, love is my power, love gives me everything I need. So I give thanks for all my blessings, God gives me everything I need. Peace is my source, peace is my power, He gives me everything I need. So I give thanks for all my blessings, He gives me everything I need. God is my source, God is my power, God gives me everything I need. So I give thanks for all my blessings, God gives me everything I need.
So this is Gabriella. And so on the last Sunday of the month, we're having our young people come in and share with you what they've been learning through the month. So they have a book they'd like to share with you, which is written by one of our own members, Sandy Medlock. And so Gabriella's going to read that, and then our choir and youth choir are going to share a song with you.
Whatever makes your heart. It was early morning on a day in August. There were still 2 days before school started. The sun began to peek through the shades, and Fred and Harry stretched, yawned, and opened their sleepy eyes. Suddenly, a grin crossed their faces, and they looked at each other with excitement. This was the day. The brothers could hardly contain themselves. Jumping out of bed, they ran to the bathroom and washed as quickly as possible. They brushed their teeth, combed their hair, dressed in shorts and T-shirts, and ran downstairs. "We're ready," said Fred to his dad, who was reading the paper and having his coffee. "Ready? Ready for what?" Dad said as he chuckled behind the paper. "This is the day," said Harry, "and we are ready to go to the fall festival." "Oh, that," said Dad, laughing. "Mom is getting ready, and then we will go. We will catch breakfast on the way." "Oh, boys," said the boys, "this is going to be the best day ever." After having breakfast at the restaurant and driving away, they arrived at the fall festival. There were colorful flags flying and balloons and tables set up with all kinds of crafts for sale. Food trucks were lined up offering every kind of food you could think of. Music was playing, and moms and dads and kids were gathered around the booths and walking every which way, here and there and everywhere. "I smell food," said Harry. "And I smell cotton candy," said Fred. "Wow," said Dad. "It wouldn't be a festival without cotton candy. Let's get some." "I'll have some too," laughed Mom. With cotton candy and sticky fingers and mouths, Harry and Fred and Mom and Dad walked around the festival, looking at everything before heading towards the really exciting stuff, like riding the rides. There was a Ferris wheel, bumper cars, and a big slide. And let's not forget the merry-go-round with horses that go up and down. "We want to try them all," yelled Harry and Fred over the noise of the crowd. Mom and Dad laughed and gave them a thumbs up. Their mouths were full of cotton candy. One of the booths that they passed on the way said face painting. "Can we have our faces painted?" asked Fred. "Yes, can we?" asked Harry. "Sure," said Mom and Dad together. Which one?" thought the two boys. There were a lot to choose from. There were pirates and stars and moons and even a sun. Skulls and snakes, too. But what caught their eyes were very colorful butterflies. "I want the purple and yellow butterfly," said Harry. "And I want the blue and black one," said Fred. "Are you sure you want butterflies?" asked Dad. "What do you think, Mom?" asked Fred and Harry excitedly. Whatever makes your heart happy is the right one," answered Mom. "Butterflies it is," said the brothers in agreement. So they headed to the rides, both with a beautiful, colorful butterfly on their cheek. It turned out to be a better day than any of them could have imagined, and they returned home with tummies full, tired and happy. The boys made sure to wash around the butterflies on their cheeks to make them last, and fell into bed for a long, happy sleep. The boys had continued washing around the butterflies, so when the first day of school arrived, the face painting was still fresh and bright. As soon as they walked through the doors, they met up with twin brothers from their class. Pat and Mike began to laugh and point at Fred and Harry. "What is that on your faces?" they laughed. "It's called face painting, and they are butterflies," answered Harry. "I know what it is, and they look silly. Butterflies are for girls," laughed Pat. "Whatever makes your heart happy is the right thing to do," said Fred. "And butterflies make us feel happy," answered Harry as they pushed past a small, curious crowd that had gathered to get to class. At the beginning of class, the teacher announced that she had a surprise for them. They're going on a field trip to the big city garden. We will see all types of wildlife, plants, and trees. And best of all, we will visit the butterfly house, an exhibit. "Wow," thought the class. "A field trip on the first day of school. What a treat." The garden was awesome. They saw wildlife collecting food for the winter and all species of birds. They listened to a talk about winter vegetables that were being planted and got to taste things made with pumpkin, like cookies. Yum! But best of all was the butterfly house. The children could walk through where the butterflies were flying, and sometimes they would land on them. But what happened next was really amazing. They seemed to recognize the boys with the butterflies on their cheeks. They flew around them and landed on their shoulders and head. One even landed on Harry's nose. Pat and Mike couldn't believe it. They wanted them to land on them, but no matter what they did, the butterflies were only landing on Fred and Harry. Pretty soon, everyone in school heard about Fred and Harry and the butterflies. Pat and Mike and the rest of the class wanted to know where they could get butterflies painting on their face. I guess you will have to wait until the next fall festival," said Fred. "But the real secret isn't the face paint. They can feel a happy heart, and that's why they land on you. When your heart is happy, it's the right thing to do." The end.
Now get down there and sing. You're not that good. All right. They have a song. Oh, come on up, you guys. Come with me up here. So this really came out of camp, so that's why I like to do it from time to time. And so I always like to call it a firmicize. So I'll lead, these guys will follow, and you'll follow them. But there's one thing I wanted to say, and I don't know if it's a throw out to my ego, but it may be. So yesterday morning, your board of trustees and I signed a 5-year agreement to have me be your senior minister. And for some reason, I feel like it's important to share that I'm here. You're stuck with me, good or bad, whatever. So we'll work through it, right? So if you would stand, and they're going to follow me, and you're going to follow them, and it's all going to be lovely. Something magnificent is happening through me right now.
Something magnificent is happening through me right now.
It is happening through my mind.
It is happening through my mind.
Through my body.
Through my body.
Through my affairs.
Through my affairs.
I think it.
I think it.
I believe it.
I believe it.
I accept it.
I accept it.
I rejoice in it.
I rejoice in it.
I name it good and very good.
I name it good and very good.
Thank you, God.
Thank you, God.
And so it is.
And so it is.
Let's sing the peace.